Getting by is normal. Living intentionally is not. If you are ready to challenge the way you think and live with purpose, you are in the right place. This is a podcast where we shift perspectives and renew mindsets to help you live a transformed, meaningful, and significant life. Of course, we do this by driving meaningful and honest conversations around key areas of life, because how you see determines how you live. Welcome to Look and Live, and I'm your host, Benobile. Let me start with a question. Why is it that money comes in, but somehow it never stays? Remember when you get paid and you get that temporary high relief? And a few days later, the same pressure returns. The account gets empty and you are counting days and praying for the next payday. If this is your experience, kindly and humbly hear me out. This episode is, of course, not a blaming you think. It's really about revealing what most people were never taught. Because predominantly majority of us were trained to earn money by virtue of the schooling system that we went through, but we're never really taught how to manage that cash flow when it comes. And without proper cash flow management, there is no income level that is truly safe. Asian system prepares us to be employable. So, of course, to monetize the skills that we have learned and earn an income by virtue of that. But what they rarely teach us is how to manage that income, use it intentionally, and turn it into a wealth creation tool that will help us achieve financial freedom. So, during my career within the financial services industry, I worked in respective places such as personal finance, and I later spent about 2 years in the credit and lending space. That experience completely changed how I see finance and people's financial lives. That's because I worked with high income earners who couldn't get by despite of their high income. I worked with low income earners who also struggled, but surprisingly, some of those had fewer problems than the high income earners. So most people would return month to month to borrow, having the same stress perpetually. That's when something that my mother always said finally made sense. It's an adage within our Shivambo culture which says money is for the keeper. Money is not for the earner, money is for the keeper. So it's not really how much comes in, it's how well you manage what comes in. Many people look wealthy. They drive nice cars, wear nice clothes, branded clothes, and live these flamboyant, lavish lifestyles. But behind that facade or that scene, there is a cash flow fragility that can crumble anytime something small happens. So, what it looks like is not always the way it is. What it looks like is not always what it is. So, when we talk about cash flow is really this simplest yet most important building block of financial freedom. It answers one key fundamental question, which is, does your income create stability or does it create stress? Here's the reality, my friend. If your expenses are higher than your income, you are in danger. And if your expenses are equal to your income, you are exposed and you are sitting on a ticking bomb, and you better get off from it. Why is this so? Fact, because life is unpredictable. Without a safety net, without a margin, emergencies become crises, debt becomes your solution, and the peace of mind disappears eventually. Cash flow is not about being rich, it's about being in control of your money. You know, I always ask, why does a vehicle have a steering wheel? It's for you to control the direction of that vehicle. If you drive a vehicle without being in control of the steering wheel, you're gonna crash. And if you do not have a good cash flow management position, your financial life will crash. Of course, the good book says whoever can be entrusted with very little can also be entrusted with much, and that Luke 16, verse 10. So cash flow management is really stewardship at smallest level, and it always precedes increase. What does that mean? God cannot give you what you want. God will give you what you can manage. So let me illustrate what I'm saying now through a very simple story. We have two farmers, Moses and Manny. Both of them own chicken farms. Every day the chickens, of course, lay 5 eggs, and Moses loves eggs, but every day he takes 4 and he saves one. Manny, he also loves eggs, but he eats all the 5 every day. So at the end of the week, Moses has 7 eggs saved, Manny has got 0. Those eggs, they hatch, Moses has more chickens produce more eggs, and over time, Moses builds a large farm and he creates wealth. Manny is still in the same position where he was. It's not because Moses earned more eggs, it's because Moses consistently set something aside before consuming everything he had. Now, this principle of paying yourself first is really one of the key principles to wealth creation. To ensure that every time you earn resources, you need to ensure that you at least put a portion aside for you not to consume everything. Be a Moses. And that remaining portion then becomes the seed that you can plant to create wealth in the future. But now we have got a challenge here. For us to be able to control our resources in a way that we leave something aside, for you to pay yourself first, you need a tool to do that. And that tool is called what? Budgeting. So, budgeting is not a restriction to enjoying life. A budget is really this deliberate, purposeful, and intentional tool that gives you control of your money. Before the money comes, you decide what you will save, what you will spend, what you will cut. And without a budget, your income will disappear and you will not even know where it went to. It doesn't matter how much you earn. But if you make a budget, even modest income can create stability, because it allows you to pay yourself first, prioritize your needs over your wants, create a safety net, and reduce impulsive purchasing, which often most marketers are pushing us into. A budget doesn't stop your employment, it just ensures that your enjoyment is planned, not financed by stress. Proverbs 21:5 says, "The plans of the diligent lead surely to profit, and haste leads to poverty." So, a financial plan can lead to abundance. Now, when we say control your money through a budgeting and ensure that you always leave something, a safety net, and not spend everything, there's often a pushback where people say, I don't earn enough money. Let's be honest, if expenses are higher than income, that's very unsustainable. And if your expenses are equal to your income, that's also dangerous. So there's only 2 ways that you can create a margin between your income and expenses. The first way is to reduce your expenses or increase your income in order to create that margin. So reducing your expenses can mean like reducing your lifestyle. It can mean that you need to take a humble pie and move at a cheaper apartment so you can save on rental. You need to cut down what you have normalized, such as eating out every weekend, and eat more often at home. It means that you need to practice the discipline of choosing stability over appearance. Sometimes you need to make sacrifices for future benefits. Sometimes you need to eat salted crackers and drink branch water. For you to survive on beans and rice and beans, like Dave Ramsey says, to ensure that you get out of the rut. So, for you to increase your income, you need to make sure that you become a person of value. That means that you need to understand the game of value creation, because that's where money comes from. You need to learn a new skill or solve a specific problem for a specific group of people, and then they reward you with money. So the more value you create, the more money flows towards you, and that's how you can increase your income. So saving is not really about how much you earn, it's about creating that margin that we are talking about. One important area within cash flow management is what we call an emergency fund. Let me say this clearly. It is an emergency not to have an emergency fund. It is an emergency not to have an emergency fund. My grandmother always used to say, you must save up for rainy days, because at some point it will rain, life will happen. It's not a matter of whether if it's gonna rain, it's just a matter of when. An emergency fund is not about growth, it's about protection. It's ensuring that you have money put aside in case of emergencies, unexpected eventualities such as car repairs. And without it, those repairs becomes a disaster. Those medical costs becomes debt, and your job loss becomes a panic. But if you have an emergency fund, those crises just become inconveniences. So the standard rules say you must at least have up to 3 to 6 months of living expenses, money that can cover 3 to 6 months of your living expenses. You don't build it overnight, but you build it with consistency. What does it do if you have it? Number one, you have a breathing space in case of eventualities. You can make better decisions. And there is some form of emotional stability when you know that you have got money put aside in case something comes up unexpected. So, Proverbs 21, verse 20 says, "The wise store up choice food and olive oil, but a fool squanders all that he has." Let's look at the final section of cash flow management, which is debt management. So the biggest cash flow destroyer can be debt. Debt is just not a financial issue, it's also a cash flow issue. So majority of us, or majority of people, they use debt to fund lifestyle, to maintain appearance, to consume things that lose value. This is, of course, the opposite of using debt as a leverage to acquire assets that grow and create cash flow. For most people, every single month, debt eats into their income. It reduces their margin, it delays their freedom, and they end up working for debt because they are so over indebted that they don't have cash flow remaining anymore after they've paid their debts. So that's when you get in a category of saying that you're over indebted. But a healthy debt management requires that you know all your debts, understand the interest that they are charging you, and having a clear repayment plan in terms of how you are going to pay off that debt before the maturity date. The rule of the thumb is to say that your debt payments should not be more than 35% of your gross income, and they call that the debt to income ratio. One of the two strategies that you can use to pay off your debt is what they call the debt snowball, whereby you list all your debts from smallest to largest, and then you start with the smallest one to the highest one. The debt avalanche focuses on the one with the highest interest first. The principle is the same. Debt must be intentional, controlled, and temporary. If you don't manage it, you'll end up living from paycheck to paycheck and becoming over-indebted. Proverbs 22, verse 7 says, "The borrower is slave to the lender." And Romans 13, verse 8 says, "Owe no one anything except love." If you are living from paycheck to paycheck, hear this clearly. You are not broken, you are not lazy. You just need a system that works, because you'll get clarity, structure, and margin once you manage your cash flow properly. So, let me bring this home with clarity. Everything we have discussed today, budgeting, emergency fund, and debt, is not theory. These are the practical steps that any serious person can follow to improve their cash flow management and regain financial control. If you do nothing else, you can start by getting on a budget today and make sure you make it consistent. You choose a specific day within a month where you do your budget before you get paid. And it's the hardest part is not budgeting. The hardest part is sticking to the budget. So you need to track your expenditure each and every single day. And you must make sure that your budget balances, and most importantly, at least leave 10% for saving. Step number 2. Once you have gotten on a budget, you need to be very intentional, deliberate, and purposeful about building your emergency fund. At least start with a target of 1 month salary of your gross salary. You keep it in a low risk, flexible account, separate from the account that you use daily. And the intent is not really high interest. The intent is to be able to access it, but it must be separate from your account. And then step number 3, start paying off your debt using the debt snowball method. Except your bond. All these smaller accounts, start paying them off except for your bond. Every debt that you eliminate improves your cash flow and it restores that margin that you are always looking for. And then step 4, you go back to rebuild your emergency fund once you have paid off all your smaller debts until it can cover 3 to 6 months of living expenses. If you follow those following steps, you are building a financial foundation that will enable you to achieve financial freedom. Let me end up by saying the following. Financial freedom is not about earning more money. It's about having a better system on how you can manage your cash flow. Keep an eye on our social media platforms for details on our upcoming financial literacy training that is themed From Paycheck to Prosperity. This practical, hands-on session is designed to help you build stronger financial foundation and financially get unstuck in 2026. This is not a theory-based training. It's a guided, practical experience where a financial coach will walk with you step by step, helping you climb out of the ditch and onto the path to financial freedom. Thank you very much for listening.